small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other.
Let's take the temperature down. Let's propose solutions. Let's make sure nobody loses their house, their family, their livelihood in a crisis.
Okay, political leaders addressing the cross-Canada convoy, protesting COVID restrictions, public health mandates, and the federal government. That convoy arriving on Parliament Hill tomorrow and into Saturday. There are some concerns, obviously, about what could happen when it gets here, but what do we make of the political response? It's Thursday. I'm here with At Issue, Chantal Hebert, Andrew Coyne, and Althia. Good to see everyone. Obviously, lots of different parts of this story. Maybe we will start with the Prime Minister and his comments from yesterday. I think a lot of people were asking questions about how far he went, too, in talking about the groups that we are expecting to show up on Parliament Hill. Chantal, was there any risk in his comments?
I think the risks are fairly small, in as much as this is the organizers of this protest seem to go out of their way to provide comments, as in we are going to ask the Governor General to dissolve Parliament and appoint us to rule the country. We will not leave until every health measure in every province and every city is done with. Go down the list. This is so far off from a protest from the 10% of truckers who are not vaccinated that I don't think there was much of a risk to Justin Trudeau there. Okay, so let's flip to the other side there, and I'll come back to you, Chantal, for your take too. But Andrew, in terms of how the Conservatives are handling this, whether it be what Mr. O'Toole said today, obviously calling for no violence, or things that his MPs have said.
Well, let's start with the MPs, and we're not just talking about, fringe backbenchers here. We're talking about people like Pierre Poilievre. We're talking people like Candice Bergen, who have been giving aid and comfort to the rally itself. And it is hard to winnow out the sort of good-hearted but confused protesters when some of the organizers themselves, as Chantal mentioned, have been spouting not just lunatic theories about how the government and constitution works, but in some cases, media contacts have been making terribly vile attacks on journalists, and in some cases, some of the participants have been spitting on them or attacking them physically. Why any Conservative MP would want to get anywhere within 1,000 miles of that kind of group, with the potential for things to get much worse on the weekend, is a bit of a mystery, except that you have a faction within the Conservative Party that sees advantage in appealing to this group, or who are at the very least concerned that that group is going to be going towards the People's Party. Mr. O'Toole himself today was, I think, not exactly on message in terms of distancing himself and his party from that kind of approach to things and those kinds of views. He seemed, if anything, to be cozying up to them in his own way. This is not going to be good for the Conservative Party in the slightest. This is going to lead the party into a very bad way. This is not where the general public of Canada wants to be anywhere near.
Well, that's what I find perplexing too, Althia, is that the vast majority of Canadians do not reflect the kinds of things that are being said here. They support vaccine mandates and are vaccinated.
That's true. I think there's a few things at play. Let's start with Erin O'Toole. I think what we saw this week is that there is a leadership vacuum in the Conservative Party. And so you have people like Andrew Scheer and Candice Bergen and Garnet Genuis and Pierre Poilievre, who've come in and who've filled the void, trying to direct the party where they want it to go. And Mr. O'Toole, very early in the week, I think it was on Monday, staked out a very clear position, refusing to say whether or not he was going to meet with the truckers, actually saying that he didn't think it was the leader of the official opposition's role to meet with any protesters on Parliament Hill, and refusing to say whether or not he supported them. And then again, very similar to the election campaign, there was pressure. They had very interesting, rambunctious 2 days of caucus meeting, and he comes out with a new position where he will meet with some truckers, not the organizers of this group, because for the reasons I think Chantal outlined, and he will not meet with them on Parliament Hill, but he will meet with the truckers off Parliament Hill somewhere. Surely we'll have a photo opportunity to convey a message that he wants to convey, which is really to have it on both sides, to be supportive of the truckers movement, but also warning, please be peaceful demonstrators. We don't want any extremist, white nationalist, racist, misogynist comments on Parliament. And so that is, I think, the challenge that we've seen from Erin O'Toole. With regards to the Prime Minister, I agree. I think that the public opinion is squarely on side, and I think there's great risk to Conservative MPs aligning themselves with this movement. At the same time, though, I think the Prime Minister is also very concerned that he doesn't want to be. He's sensitive to the attacks of sowing divisions in the country, and he doesn't want to repeat the racist and misogynist comments that he made earlier in the fall when he said that this was a group of extremists, some of whom were racist and misogynist. So we've seen some massaging of his language as well.
Chantal.
Okay, there are two facts that seem to be absent from the discourse on both sides of this. The first is the 90% of truckers who happen to be vaccinated, fact. The other fact is, suppose tomorrow, and it's not going to happen, that Justin Trudeau suddenly caves. He won't. That will not get a single one of the truckers who are demonstrating and coming to Ottawa on Saturday across the border, because the same rule applies to them as they cross the border.
That's right.
One, on the politics of it, when your deputy leader, your predecessor, and your finance critic do not wait for your cue to fan fires that will be burning your own party, you have lost all moral authority, and that is the only comment I can make on Erin O'Toole at this point.
I'll just end with you, Andrew, and then we're going to talk more about Mr. O'Toole in the next block. But is this not a lesson, though, that the Conservative Party should have taken from the election? Because this is the way that the Liberals sort of played them on some of these issues during the election.
Well, and from before the election, from the Yellow Jackets, that business, you've got a section of the party and a section of the parliamentary caucus, including the people we've mentioned, who are quite willing to play with this kind of fire, and they are, in my opinion, disqualifying themselves from public, position of public trust. If you cannot disavow and distance yourself, first of all, from the kind of extremism that we're seeing among some of the elements here, but secondly, look, there's a difference between not demonizing people who are anti-vaccination or anti-vaccine mandates, and people like to draw distinctions between them that I don't think are really terribly tenable. There's a difference between not demonizing them and pretending that there's some kind of valid basis to their objections, and saying that people are losing their jobs, for no reason, supposedly. All they have to do is get themselves vaxxed. It is not a terrible imposition. It is not an assault on their rights. And somebody has to be able to say that without, as I say, at the same time demonizing. This should not be that hard for people who are in politics, after all.
A post-election report on the Conservative Party's 2021 campaign found Erin O'Toole was, quote, overmanaged and overcoached by senior staff. The report was commissioned by party brass and said that while O'Toole started strong on the trail, he didn't connect well enough with voters. He wasn't himself at key moments. A Conservative source who attended today's caucus meeting and told our own Hannah Thibodeau that the presentation spent little time on O'Toole's own failings. So that brings us back to at issue on what's next for the Conservative Party and Mr. O'Toole, Chantal, Andrew, and Althia. As I said, Althia, you'll start us off on this one. What do you make of the report? Was it a serious attempt to see what went wrong? And what does this tell us about the future of Erin O'Toole?
It was not a serious attempt to really dig into what happened. Apparently, it didn't even discuss Mr. O'Toole's many flip-flops during the campaign, which is kind of shocking when you think about it, because we certainly spent a lot of time talking about it. Much of the blame was laid at Stephen Harper's feet for the kneecap ban and the tip line and that failure to win over immigrant communities and minorities, something that the party knows it needs to move on. I think most important, what has happened over the past 2 days of caucus meetings, especially today, is the sheer anger. Basically, Erin O'Toole's caucus is turning on him, and the days of his leadership are counted. Either he will decide to call a vote with his caucus members, or the caucus will decide to do it for him. And at the same time that you're having caucus MPs speak very forcefully back to their leader, and very clear cleavages happening within that caucus, you also have riding associations across the country thinking that they're going to follow the steps of the Foothills Riding Association in Alberta, calling for an earlier leadership review, so something before the end of June as opposed to August of 2023. So I think the takeaway is that Mr. O'Toole's days are numbered.
So
Possibly,
what,
question mark. At least his leadership is coming for a vote.
Well, so I was saying during the commercial that I'm only feeling that this week, that I didn't feel it before. Maybe I was talking to the wrong people. But what has changed, do you think, here, Chantal, that now leads us to think that there's real trouble brewing?
It's not just this week. It's over the past month and a half, from the Christmas break to today. Yes. That incredible video where he decided to put his face on what was a blatant lie about the Liberals suddenly getting ready to put you out in the cold in winter in a year and a half, which I think made some of the MPs who actually would have wanted him to stay suddenly speechless. How do you defend a lie, a blatant lie? And then the events of this week just they're a symptom of how weakened this leadership has become over the past week and a half. Seriously, Stephen Harper lost in 2015, and the Conservatives are only waking up to some of the reasons that they lost 6 years, 7 years later?
Yeah.
That is, to go to Althia's point, let's get serious here. There is very little that is serious there, and a leader who allows himself to be scripted and overmanaged by staff probably is not a leader that's ready for the prime time as Prime Minister.
Well, you would also, I think, expect a leader of a party, Andrew, to accept responsibility for mistakes, and I didn't hear a lot of that either today.
No, I mean, it's so much larger than that. Look, the problems of the leader and the problems of the lost election both have a common cause, which is that the party is divided. And the party is divided not on some large question of principle, but it's divided between a Yahoo faction that is essentially unwilling to deal with reality, whether it's on things like climate change or things like the pandemic and the vaccines. And so between them and a larger faction that doesn't even know what it stands for anymore. The leader, Erin O'Toole, tried to straddle that divide first serially by running for the leadership in pursuit of one faction and then running in the campaign for another, angling towards the center. But then also during the campaign, as you mentioned, was flip-flopping back and forth even internally. But all of those are basically symptoms of this impossible position he's in, or that he's unable to execute, where he can somehow appeal both to the center and to the Yahoo faction at the same time. Maybe a better leader could, but I suspect, parties get the leaders that are representative of where the party is at. And right now, this is a very confused and divided party that has not confronted the extremist within its midst and is reaping the whirlwind because of it. So, the conceit of these reports, like the Cummings report, is that it's all just a matter of better strategy and tactics. We didn't get our message out well, or, we didn't do outreach very well. And those are all probably true as well, but they don't really get at the fundamental problem with the party right now.
Okay, I got to leave it there. I feel we will probably speak about this again soon. So thank you all very much. I appreciate it.